crafty friends, it's Alicia here with a project for Tailored Expressions. In today's video, I'm going to be creating a set of 4 holiday cards using the brand new Folk Holiday Tags Stamp and Stencil combo with coordinating dies and All Together Occasions 3 Sentiment Stamp and Die set. To build my card bases, I'll be using the Frame and Frame 2 cutting plate, stitched rectangle stacklets, and stitched easy strips in 1/4 and 1/2 inch. To add a little sparkle, I also brought in some gold glitter drip drops. For cardstock, I'll be using blue corn, cherry pop, and sugar cube, and for stamping and ink blending, I got out blue corn, cherry pop, gumball, and honey, along with some coordinating blending brushes. To help with stamping, I'll be using the TE Teal Misty and the Just Press tool. And I also got out a variety of adhesives to hold everything together. Let's get crafty! I'm going to get started today by stamping the Folk Holiday tags onto a scrap of sugar cube with some Gumball ink. I set up my cardstock in the lower right hand corner of the Misty, and then I'm just going to put the stamp face down onto it and pick it up with the door. Now I did want to make sure I got a nice solid blue and a little bit darker than the Gumball itself, so I did ink this up and stamp it twice, both times using the Just Press tool to help me get a nice crisp impression. Since I already have my Misty out, I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiments. For this, once again, I'm using a scrap of sugar cube, but this time I'll be stamping with honey ink. This sentiment stamp has lots of great sayings for your holiday cards, even a to from if you're going to use the Folk Holiday tags as tags, and then later you'll see how I can just cut them all at once with a single die. Before I do any die cutting, I am going to add some color to my holiday tags using the coordinating stencils and honey, blue corn, and cherry pop ink. I'm going to get started with stencil number 1 and the honey ink, and to temporarily hold my piece in place, I put some adhesive on the back and removed a little bit of the tack with my fingers. Then I'm going to get that first stencil set up, and there are stamped squares and squares in the stencil to help with alignment. I'll be holding that in place with just a couple pieces of painter's tape, and then I'm going to get my brush inked up and get this blended. I just ink blend in clockwise and counterclockwise motions until I like the coverage. For stencil number 2, I'm using blue corn ink, and I start by setting it up with the alignment guides, but just keep in mind you might have to wiggle it just a little bit to get the alignment just right. One thing I want to point out about using this blue corn ink now is that there are some parts of the stamped images that were done in the lighter Gumball ink. So to ensure that I could still see those, I did go with a little bit of a lighter hand when ink blending on the ornament and the tree on the left. I finished off the stenciling by using cherry pop ink with stencil number 3, and now here's my favorite part, the reveal. Let me know down in that comment section below what colors you might use for folk art inspired holiday cards. I brought back in my stamped sentiment piece and took both sheets off camera with their coordinating dies to cut those out. The Folk Holiday tags does have a couple toppers if you want to turn the bottom 2 images into ornaments. I decided to go ahead and add those to make it more cohesive with the other 2 images to have that pop of yellow on the top. I cut a piece of blue corn cardstock to 5.5 by 4.25, and now I'm going to use the stitched easy strips in 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch to build a tone-on-tone pattern onto this piece. I did make sure that I used scraps that were at least 5.5 inches wide so that when I put them at a diagonal on that piece of blue corn cardstock, they hung off the edge and would go all the way across. I cut 2 sets of the 1/2 inch strips and 1 set of the 1/4 inch strips. And also while I was off camera, I cut a scrap of honey into one of the 1/2 inch strips. I'm going to be using this for a spacer, so that's why I chose a different color. So I don't have to worry about getting something perfectly straight across the cardstock, that's why I'm going to start out at an angle. Now you can adjust the angle to whatever you like best, just make sure that your strip will go completely across the cardstock. I added some liquid glue to the back of the first 1/2 inch strip, and then when I went to place that on the background panel at the angle, I tried to get it about centered from top to bottom. Now when you're placing these so they don't stick to your surface, you probably will want to rub off the excess at each end. Now to know where I place my second strip, I'm going to temporarily tack down the spacer, the honey strip, and because I took some of the tack off the back of that with my fingers, once I have that second strip placed, I can just remove the honey strip and keep moving it so that I get those nice and evenly spaced and fill the blue corn cardstock from top to bottom. You might have noticed that I skipped putting the very top and the very bottom piece, and that's because for that I can actually use one of the strips cut in half because I don't quite need the whole length. So what I'm going to do for this is get my spacer put back into place, and now instead of putting the adhesive on the back of the blue corn strip, I'm going to put it on the corner of the blue corn mat or base piece. Once the half strips are in place, I'm going to set the spacer to the side because I don't need that to put down the 1/4 inch pieces. For these, what I do is add glue to the back, just like with the first set, but now I'm just going to eyeball it and get it centered between two of the 1/2 inch strips. Now you could definitely build a background in a different way. You could use card maps, you could use an embossing folder. I just like the way this looked. It almost reminds me of a candy cane with the different stripes. When this piece has dried, you could definitely trim off the excess with some scissors, but I'm going to be using the largest stitched rectangle stacklets to cut this down. I like that this adds some more stitching detail, like with the easy strips, and just makes it look a little more finished. For an added pop of color, I use the middle die from the Frame and Frame 2 cutting plate on a scrap of cherry pop cardstock. Off camera, I prepared a blue corn card base and I added a piece of sugar cube to the inside for the personal message. I also added some foam sticky strips to the back of my cherry pop frame, and now I'm going to start assembling the card. The first thing I'm going to do is use tape runner and add my striped piece to the front center of the card base, and then I'm going to add the frame. Once I have pulled the release paper, I did put some liquid glue on the back of that, just so now when I go to put it onto the card base, I have some wiggle time to get it nice and centered and straight. Now you might have noticed you can see a little bit of that glue underneath the frame or inside there, but don't worry because this dries completely clear. I want my focal point and the sentiment to be at the same height as the frame, so off camera I added some foam sticky strips to the back of each. Now on the tree, because the star and the trunk will go over the frame, I made sure not to put any foam tape there. Instead, I added a little bit of liquid glue and then got that placed on the frame. For the sentiment, just so I had again some wiggle time to get my sentiment nice and straight and where I want it, I added liquid glue to the back of the foam and then got that put in place. To finish the cards off with a little sparkle, I used liquid glue and embelly jelly to place some glitter drip drops on the front. And surprise! You might be wondering what I did with all of the focal points and sentiments. I actually made 4 cards today with this same look and layout. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's video. If you enjoyed the process, a thumbs up is appreciated. And if you're not already a subscriber, we do hope you'll click on the button below so you're the first to know about our latest videos. To find out more about the products I used today, you can check out the links in the description box below or visit the Tailored Expressions online store at tailoredexpressions.com.